So I'm generally not a big fan of debunking videos. As I've mentioned before, religious affiliation is a complicated matter and is simply never reducible to just one argument. Everybody has their own beliefs which they feel are grounded in rationality. Today though, I'm going to give you the one slam dunk argument against what the Jehovah's Witnesses teach. And I do this only to help people in their thinking. I know that waking up to some of the realities in the society can be incredibly disorienting. So this is for the purpose of giving yourself permission to think. Don't think it's going to stop a zealous believer in their tracks or make you win arguments. That's not the purpose of it. We all know how unrealistic that sort of thing is anyway. This is for the health of your own mind. If you're new to my channel, we generally talk about the law of attraction and philosophy. And so following my main argument, I'd like to discuss why philosophical investigation is so important, even if you're one who just has a passing interest in it. Let's get started. Hey good people, I'm Derek London. Thanks for checking out my channel. Around here we talk about everything law of attraction. We discuss a lot about the psychological, scientific, and rational basis for subscribing to this philosophy of mine. And in fact, if your reality could stand some change for the better, you have only to start there, with your mind. Hit that subscribe button and settle in, because your life will never be the same. Hey everyone, thanks as usual for watching. So what is this knockdown, blowout argument I have against what the Jehovah's Witnesses teach? Well, it's an incredibly simple and extremely cogent piece of reasoning. According to their publications, the governing body, that is, the spiritual leaders of the Jehovah's Witnesses, claim to be the one and only channel God and Jesus are using in this time of the end for spiritual instruction and direction. The only way to have a proper relationship with God is to accept His organization and submit to it. This so-called faithful and discreet slave class is the only group God reveals proper biblical interpretation and understanding to. That's their claim. This is nothing new. Man has used this kind of reasoning throughout history ad nauseum in manipulating people's loyalties. There are many terms for this. It can be called religious authority, revealed truth, fundamentalism, and so on. More generally, it's just called an argument from authority. As I'll show, it's not just religious people who pull this. It's used in many different fashions, and I'll list a number of them later. But the claim is always the same, you see. Don't rely on your faculty of reason. Your intellect will lead you astray. Now, if you believe in the Bible, I totally respect that, and I have no interest in undermining your trust in it. But very often people will resort to the following scriptures in pulling this subtle trick. They'll invoke Proverbs 3 verse 5, "Trust in thy Lord with all your heart, and lean not upon your own understanding." Colossians 2 verse 8, "Beware lest any man spoil you through philosophy and vain deceit." 1 Corinthians 1:27, "God hath chosen the foolish things of the world to confound the wise." 2 Timothy 3 verse 7, "Ever learning, and never able to come to the knowledge of the truth." Ecclesiastes 12 verse 12, "Be careful, my child, of anything beyond them. There's no end to the excessive production of scrolls. Studying too much wearies the flesh." 1 Corinthians 8 verse 1, "Knowledge puffs up, but love builds up." This use, or some would call it a misuse of Scripture, is what's called anti-intellectualism. Just recently, I was engaging with someone whose reason for dismissing what I said was that I had overthought the issue. And I only bring this up to show you how broadly this kind of nonsense, an argument from authority, is used. You see, as will become evident throughout this video, once you have attacked reason as such at any point during a conversation, there is no recourse or chance of rational dialogue. It's not possible to overthink something, because to recognize you've made an error will always require what? More thinking, right? Besides, to use this as a refutation is simply not an argument. It can always be rejoined with, well, you've underthought the issue. This example is the exact same kind of objection as the witnesses used to reject the views of everyone else. I'll do a video on anti-intellectualism in the future. It's tremendously common and profoundly arrogant. But this is the assertion: you should dismiss your faculty of reasoning as implicitly faulty and follow me. When someone makes a claim like this, or its like, they are in fact giving you permission to not take them seriously in their attempts to convince you of something. So the knockdown blowout argument is this. It can be stated in one sentence, it requires no further justifications, it necessitates no education or prior assumptions. It's the one thing you can come back to, even when you doubt everything else, and it's this. If I am to fundamentally, or at any point, mistrust my faculty of thought, reason, and intellect, what is left in the pursuit of truth? Unless arguments are supported by reasons, conclusions buffeted by premises, then you are completely justified to reject all such manipulations as utter gibberish. Because anyone who tells you to mistrust your intellect, again, at any point, is essentially telling you that our brains are not capable of accessing truth, in which case the comment itself is rendered nonsensical by its very utterance. Okay, now the teachings of the Jehovah's Witnesses are a pretty dramatic illustration for this kind of unreasoning. But they're not the only ones who do it. Despite disqualifying as anti-intellectualism, it's tremendously common at all levels of society, and yes, even in the universities. Now, I'm a fan of academia. I recently did a video on the Jehovah's Witnesses and education, which will be linked below in the description and in the end screen. But you have to keep your eyes open for anti-intellectualism because it's very sneaky and it's used incredibly deftly by those who have no other intention but to be right or gain power. I wish to show you a few more examples of this sort of thing so you become keenly ready for it and you don't get pulled in by either anti-intellectuals or sophists all the same. Here they are. I'm more educated than you. Well, this may be the case, and you should be open-minded to the idea that they may be right, but someone's education has nothing to do with their rightness or wrongness. On my channel, you'll notice that I often quote many academics and professionals. And yes, there is a certain amount of respect that is automatic in doing this. But the argument is not hinged on their status. It's based on the fact that these experts will give you evidence for their conclusions. When you reference a book in asserting one of your points, it's not so you can take a break intellectually or write off someone else's qualifications. It's so that you can examine a body of work and evidence that will be presented. So this is a common one. Education can win you a degree of automatic respect, sure, but anyone who says they're right because they are more educated is aggressing reason. Here's another common one. I'm older than you. Or here's a variation of it. I've noticed that some of the hardline Catholics like using this one. Sometimes they'll say, Catholicism is the oldest empire which has survived relentless internal and external attacks. Ergo, Catholicism is the one true religion. While such staying power is impressive, it still doesn't qualify as an argument. Because if history had played out any other way, then another religion would have assumed the role of being the one true faith. It's accurate that just like someone who's more educated may be worthy of a degree of automatic respect, I think our elders are too. Let's face it, the likelihood of them being more informed is quite high. But again, they will have to give you reasons for their conviction. So the argument from seniority is equally an attack on reason. But here is its opposite, is when people say, your position is reflective of one with early onset dementia. I watched several debates with Peter Atkins and John Lennox, and Peter used this one repeatedly. Again, this is not a valid point. It's yet another volley upon reason, because there is no attempt to engage the ideas. Now here's another one, but it's far more sly. When evolutionists try to explain someone's religious convictions, by saying the hypersensitive agency detector is an outgrowth of natural selection. Let me explain the agency detector for a moment. It's a circuitry in your brain that causes you to mistake a rustling branch for a snake, or spotting faces and shapes in the clouds and Rorschach tests. In other words, your belief in God is nothing more than a trick your brain is playing on you to see agency where there isn't one necessarily. Evolutionists will often say, you're only a Christian because you're Irish, or they'll say that you're only religious because you have a fear of death or a confirmation bias. None of these are actual arguments. Indeed, the very insistence upon evolution as a theory of everything, or the explanation of conscious life, in itself implies the theory should be doubted, because it follows that our minds are not then capable of comprehending truth beyond survivalistic, behavioral, or reciprocal motivations, thus rendering the entire theory itself is nonsense. Something Matt Dillahunty frequently does in The Atheist Experience is extol the virtues of skepticism as a critical thinking tool. But again, skepticism leads you into paradox, because no one is a pure skeptic. Therefore, anything that doesn't fall into his myopic view of what is reasonable evidence should be doubted. It's another way of saying only I am able to look at evidence rationally. All of these arguments are complete nonsense. It's not hostile to his opponent's position, it's an offense on reason. Here are a list of other arguments that are utterly paradoxical and unfriendly towards sense-making. There is no truth. Conservatism is implicitly bigoted. You didn't vote in the last election, therefore your opinion of its outcome is irrelevant and without merit. You are dogmatic because of your beliefs or your upbringing. What do you know about hardship or discipline? You're overprivileged. Your thinking is being influenced by the devil. Sometimes the witnesses will use that one. Of course you'd believe such and such. You're a Mormon. Of course you're an atheist. You're a Jew whose ancestors went through the Holocaust. None of these conclusions are supported with reasons. Aside from being personal attacks, they qualify as a skirmish upon rationality, because it is asserting that truth is inaccessible based on our hereditary or psychological barriers. So getting back to the topic of the witnesses, I'm not telling you how to win arguments with them. I'm giving you a cognitive tool you can use to know that you are justified in questioning a particular authority which seeks to interfere with or control your thinking. If an authority who is trying to tell you what is or what is not appropriate to think, you must ask yourself if this person or group at any point in their arguments are telling you to mistrust your faculty of reason and thought. If so, you don't need any further justifications for rejecting such attempts at thought control. I remember in my own experience when I was a believing witness, unsure whether I should allow myself to entertain certain questions. It wasn't until I understood what was really being stated about our faculty of thinking. Do the scriptures not tell you to worship God with your whole mind? Assuming he exists, the highest force in the universe would scarcely give you an intellect, but then tell you to mistrust it at specific points along the way, at any point along the way. I've mentioned in past videos how it's true there are certain mathematical and logical paradoxes that reason will bring you to. In fact, there are many of them. As a result, even certain intellectuals have said to mistrust your intelligence. I think neo-Darwinism is a prime example of that. But you have to appreciate that it's reason which leads you to understand the paradox in the first place. This idea that thinking is the problem is where our eyebrows should always peak. So if you feel on some level that you are being manipulated, this is an excellent test you can use to know you're justified in questioning certain assumptions. It takes many forms, so be on the lookout for them. And that's where we come to philosophy. I did a video not long back entitled, Why Philosophy Matters. It'll be linked below in the description and in the end screen. While there are many philosophers who can be just as arrogant and closed-minded as any religious fanatic, the discipline of philosophy is a pure one. Don't let's forget, it was philosophy that gifted us the scientific method. So if you're a Jehovah's Witness who's become disoriented, I have no designs on converting you to anything. In fact, I have nothing to convert you to anyway. You can remain as a witness, but for heaven's sake, give yourself permission to think. I know a lot of people, both witnesses and non-witnesses, who deal with an immense amount of internal conflict based on thoughts that they think are unacceptable. It's so unhealthy and unnecessary. You'll be much happier and more contented in your life by giving yourself this freedom. Intellectual freedom in no way suggests that you have to leave your family or your religion. I know members who remain for familial and economic reasons despite not believing. One does not necessarily imply the other. So remember this epistemic tool whenever you feel disoriented. If I am to fundamentally, or at any point, mistrust my faculty of thought, reason, or intellect, what is left in the pursuit of truth? Let me know what you think of that below in the comments. This is Derek London, and I hope to see you again very soon. Hey guys, did you like this video? You know what to do. And if something I mentioned today resonated with you, click one of them cards on this screen. I have lots of related content sure to interest you. Thanks as always for your views, and we'll see you next time.